I'm Boluwatife Fayemi. So the topic of my talk is anyone can guess that URL, protecting media files in Django. Do you have any Django developer in the house? All right, good. So I know we've been talking about AI for some time now today. So this is a little bit different. We are going to be talking about data protection, security, and compliance. So why this talk? The Django developers that are here today can attest to the fact that it is very easy to undo file upload in Django. But there is one key thing that does not come out of the box that is left to the developer to implement, which is protecting these media files. So in this talk, we are going to explore why protecting media files matter and how to actually do it. So before we proceed, we'll just have a quick overview of how Django handles media file. So in settings.py file, we usually set the media URL and the media root. So the media root is the actual directory where user uploaded documents are stored if you are using your server as the file storage. So and then if you are in the development mode, if you're in the development mode, that is, if your debug is still true, you are going to set you are going to set your URLs in such a way that all the files that are in the media directory, that is your media root, are available via the media URL. That is, you have something like, let's say your domain is example.com. So you have all the files that are in the media directory. You have all the files that are in the media directory. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. So sorry for the delay. I'm on this slide. So on the left part of the slide, you are going to see a directory structure. So in this directory structure, you can see the media directory. So in this media directory, you can see user one folder, user two folder, user three folder. So in user one folder, you can see there's a file there which is passport.png, user two that's felix.png, and user three that's passport.png. So the way file upload works in Django is that by default, the name of the file that the user is uploading, that's where it's going to be stored on the server. Or if you are using cloud service provider, that's where it's going to be stored in your bucket or your container, as the case may be. So by the time you go from development into production, you usually use a web server. So this web server might be Nginx, it might be Apache, it might be Microsoft IIS. So this is what a typical Nginx configuration looks like for a Django application. So Nginx is serving as a reverse proxy to your Django application. So the key part in this Nginx configuration is actually line 16 to line 18 because that's the location media block. So if any URL comes and it matches this particular pattern, that is slash media slash. So what happens is that Nginx is going to look into this directory www backend slash media and serve all the files that are there. So in that case, so if you have a URL that is like example.com slash media slash user one slash passport.png, it's going to automatically serve the file. So is there anything wrong with this approach? Actually, there's nothing wrong with this approach, and at the same time, there is something wrong with this approach. As you know, in software engineering, if you ask senior engineers a question, what they usually reply with is, it depends, right? Can you attest to that? Yes. So context is very important. It depends on what you are building. So if you are building a sensitive application and you know that your application is going to contain sensitive documents, sensitive files, then this approach is wrong. But if you are building an application that does not contain sensitive files, that does not contain sensitive documents, then this is the way to go. There is nothing wrong with this. So, okay, there's a pattern. So why is this wrong for a sensitive application? A potential hacker can easily spot the pattern in which you are using to serve media files in your application. Like in this case, for instance, you can see the first URL is user1 passport.png. So as a potential hacker using your system can see that the pattern in this URL is that you are using the UID, the user ID. Let's say you are using auto increment ID in your URL pattern. So that means I can see user one. Let's say my user ID is user one, your user ID is user two. If I want to guess your passport, I can easily just do some do some guesses. And that's why the topic is anyone can guess that URL. So I can do some guess by saying user three and just check. Maybe my first try might be passport.png and that didn't work. But by the time I change the file extension to .jpeg, I can actually access your file. So imagine this is a sensitive document. It's a sensitive document. Let's say it's a trade secret document for your company, or it's an intellectual property, or a user NEPA bill that has been submitted for KYC. And this document will actually contain your full name, your house address, and things like that, publicly available on the internet without having to like check, is this user the actual owner of the file or not? So why protect media files? The reasons why we protect media file has been categorized into three reasons here. You can protect media files for compliance, paid content, or user privacy. So compliance is very important when you are dealing with user data, and there are various compliance programs that we have today. Things like GDPR, which is for people in the EU residents, and we have our own here in Nigeria, which is NDPR, Nigeria Data Protection Regulation. We also have IPA, which is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So imagine that you are building a health related application, let's say telemedicine app for instance, and you have users of that platform uploading their test results, medical records, past histories, and these files are publicly accessible on the internet. Will you like something like that? Will you use an application where your medical records, the result of all the tests you've conducted are available online, like publicly, without any security? Will you use something like that? Okay, good. So another reason why we protect media file is paid content. Imagine you are building an LMS application, you are selling PDF, you are selling video content, ebooks, and these media files are just available on the internet. And all it takes to access it is just by guessing the URL of that document. Will you pay for a platform like that? Okay, maybe in the first 2 months you might pay, but immediately you notice that pattern, you stop paying and try and use this loophole to take advantage of the system. I mean, we all like free things, right? Okay, so another reason is user privacy. So, um, for instance, if you are doing KYC, most of us use fintech apps here, and at some point when you reach a certain threshold, you'll be asked to like verify who you are so that they can know you. You upload your passport, your pictures, and you might be asked to upload like your NEPA bill. You might be able to take pictures of your house. So these are documents. These are personal data that are sensitive. So you have to make sure that these documents, these media files, are protected. So, talking about user privacy, there is a concept known as PII. Does anyone know the meaning of PII? Anybody? Okay, you can see that to my slide. But but basically, PII is what makes you really. So these are things like your name, your uh, your age, your title, your gender. So PIIs are just data points that can be used to uniquely identify a person. So PII can be classified into different categories depending on the criteria that you are using. So in this slide, I have it classified into four, which is direct identifier, partial identifier, sensitive, and non-sensitive. So direct identifiers are just data that uniquely identify a person. And these are things like your name, your NIN, your house, your home address. And partial identifiers are like data that they cannot uniquely identify you. But that by the time you combine one plus one, by the time you combine one or two data points together, it actually pinpoints to you. And then another classification is sensitive and non-sensitive. So sensitive data are basically data that when they are exposed to the public, they can actually cause harm to such an individual. So these are things like your account balance, religion, your race, and things like that. Then non-sensitive data are things that when they are exposed, it's just the opposite of sensitive data, really. I think I should put a disclaimer here because some of these things are subjective. Some people might say that they don't want another person to know their age, they don't want their age to be exposed publicly. So that's dependent on the individual. So yeah, so the first step when you want to protect, especially when you are when your company, your organization want to embark on compliance program, the first thing you have to do is that you have to identify the data that you are collecting. So if you are collecting user data, you have to know the user data you are collecting, and you have to know the purpose. So the next step, and a key important step in protecting data, is that you have to classify this data. You will agree with me that it's not all data that needs protection, right? Okay, so I have listed here about 14. Yeah, I have listed here 14 media files. So, um, is there anyone interested? I need about 2 or 3 volunteers that will take these media files and classify it into like this 4 quadrants. Any takers? Make sure that these file names that are uploaded by users are unguessable. So how do you do that? You ensure that you rename the files that has been uploaded by users. So the reason why we could guess the file name earlier was because we are following the file name that has already been named by the person uploading the pictures. So what we could do is that we can use a random UUID to name the file. So this is what the URL becomes by the time you rename the file. So now you agree with me that this is somehow unguessable. I mean, it will be difficult to guess this. But I must tell you that this is actually not foolproof, and this is using the techniques known as security through obscurity. So the other technique is signed access, signed URL or SAS token, and this is popularly used by your cloud service provider. So if you are storing your files in AWS bucket or Azure Blob Storage, so this is what it uses. And all what it does is that is to provide a time limited scope to private resources that is in your bucket or your container. And this is what a signed URL looks like. So this is what it looks like. So it has the signature, it has the credentials and the expiration. So this is time limited. So if you click this link now, by the time you are going to click it in like in the next 1 or 2 hours, it's no longer going to be available. It would have expired. So the last technique is using web server internal redirect, and this is when you take advantage of internal redirect directive in Nginx. And what this does is that it's going to mark the location media block as a private directory that can only be accessed through an internal redirect. So this means that Django will do some validation before you can actually access that file. So it is only if you have access to the file that you can actually access the media file. So due to time, so I have some list of best practices here. So always make sure you classify your data before storing, just like we did just now, and use short-lived URL, and ensure that you do not have auto-index on in your Nginx configuration, because this is what your URL is going to look like